identity. So in these questions we start from one side, always from more complicated side, and simplify, just manipulate using the formulas and get to the right other side, simpler side, and a lot of times that happens to be the right hand side. So here we say left side, left hand side or left side, cosine of x times cosecant of x times tangent of x. We try to write down everything in terms of sine and cosine, okay, because they are more familiar to us. So cosine, just leave cosine. Cosecant, okay, cosecant is reciprocal of sine, so we can write 1 over sine times tangent. Okay, the quotient identity, tangent is sine over cosine, so sine over cosine. So cosine means cosine x over 1. Okay, now on the top cosine, bottom cosine cancel, cosine goes once. Same thing here, so 1 times 1 times 1, simply 1, that's the right side. Okay, that's what we are supposed to get. Next, tangent theta plus cotangent equals secant times cosecant. So let's start from left side. Tangent plus cotangent. So we always try to write in terms of sine and cosine, and when possible. So tangent is sine over cosine plus cotangent, reciprocal of tangent means just the cosine over sine. Okay, cotangent is reciprocal of tangent, so we just flip this fraction. Now we need to add these two fractions. For we need to make the common denominator, same denominator. Here is cosine, here is sine. So let's multiply first by the bottom of second. So we multiply sine theta on the top, sine theta on the bottom. Here we multiply this fraction by cosine on the top, cosine on the bottom. This way we get same denominator, which is sine cosine. Okay, sine times cosine, so sine times cosine. Okay, on the bottom sine time, sorry, on the top sine times sine, 2 copies, sine is square, by the way, sine square theta plus cosine times cosine, cosine square theta. Now whenever we combine two fractions, the bottom is always simplified, common denominator, we simplify the top, and here we get sine square plus cosine square. That's the most famous Pythagorean identity. Okay, sine square plus cosine square of the same angle means this collectively becomes 1. Okay, sine plus cosine is not 1 though. Sine square plus cosine square is 1. 1 over sine theta cosine theta. Now let's look at our destination. So we are supposed to get secant cosecant. Secant is reciprocal of cosine, 1 over cosine. Cosecant is 1 over sine. Yeah, we have that. So 1 means we can write 1 is 1 times 1. And now 1 over cosine, that part don't have to circle, but you can just think 1 over cosine is secant, and 1 over sine is cosecant. Okay, and that's how we have right hand side. Okay, let's do the same thing. Oh, almost same, tangent. So we have left side cosine theta times quantity cotangent plus tangent. So we try to convert everything in terms of sine cosine. So cosine is just cosine, okay, cotangent plus tangent. Tangent is sine over cosine, and reciprocal means cosine over sine. So this is cosine over sine, okay, and this one is sine over cosine like previous. Now we need to add, okay, it's the same thing here. We need to make common denominator. Outside is cosine theta, so we multiply this by the bottom of second, means cosine. Cosine on the top, cosine on the bottom. To make the same denominator, we multiply by sine. Okay, so we have the common denominator, cosine theta, sine theta. Cosine times cosine, cosine square theta, plus sine times sine, sine square theta. Okay, on the top, sine square plus cosine square is 1, and so is cosine square plus sine square, okay, from the Pythagorean identity. Okay, this is like x square plus y square equals 1 on the unit circle. So this collectively is 1. So we got cosine theta outside times the top is 1. So I'm going to get rid of this parenthesis. 1 over, this is on the times on the bottom. Okay, now this cosine is on the top, this is on the bottom. Top bottom same thing, we can cancel. That leaves 1 over sine theta, and the reciprocal of sine is cosecant theta, and that's what we are supposed to get. That is right side. So left hand side is right hand side. So here we got secant minus secant times sine square equals cosine. So we start with left side. Left side is secant theta minus secant theta times sine square theta. Okay, so minus here secant, we got two terms. It's like x minus x, same thing, and some other, let's say y square maybe. When we simplify, means we can just factor x out first, then do the rest. So let's do the same thing here. From these two terms, before we change to sine cosine, we can simplify, means factor secant theta out. Everything out means 1, secant out, sine square. Okay, secant is 1 over cosine, by the way. We need to convert into sine and cosine. Here 1 minus sine square, we just saw cosine square plus sine square is 1. So we can just manipulate this formula to get something for 1 minus sine square. How? This is the original formula. Now we can subtract sine square from both sides. That gives cosine square theta equals, subtract sine square, right? 1 minus sine square theta. That means 1 minus sine square is cosine square. So 1 minus sine square collectively is cosine square theta. Cosine square theta means cosine theta times cosine theta. 1 cosine, 1 copy cancel from top and bottom. That means 1 cosine theta times 1 cosine theta on the top. And that's what we have in the right side. Okay. Cosine times tangent, sine times cotangent equals 1. There is nothing common, but we can convert into sine and cosine. So left side is this, which is cosine square. That's just cosine square. Tangent square. Tangent is sine over cosine, and here square means sine square over cosine square, plus sine square is just sine square. Cotangent is reciprocal of tangent, so cosine over sine got square, so cosine square over sine square. Okay, let's try to simplify now. We can to multiply. Oh, this is on the top, 1, nothing means over 1. Top bottom same, cancel. That leaves sine square theta times 1 sine square plus 1 times cosine square theta. And sine square plus cosine square, that's the most famous Pythagorean identity of trig. Sine square plus cosine square is 1, and that is what we want to see. Right side. Here we got left side is more complicated. So left side equals this. Looking at the destination, that is our right hand side, we got only cosine. That means in the left, I mean this is good, and this sign should be converted to cosine square if possible. And what is the relationship between sine and cosine? There is no relationship between exactly sine and cosine, but for square there is one. We saw sine squared plus cosine square is 1. And from this left side we are only trying to get cosine square. That means we want to convert sine square. So if we subtract cosine square from both sides, so sine square theta is 1 minus cosine square theta. So we can always get the modified formula. So sine square is indeed 1 minus cosine square. Okay, sine theta is not 1 minus cosine, only squares. So left side 2 cosine square theta, we just leave that, minus 3 times sine square means, so we need to put parentheses, we need to distribute. Sine square is 1 minus cosine square. Now we distribute 2 cosine square theta minus 3 minus minus plus 3 cosine square theta. Now let's combine like terms. 2 copies of cosine square plus 3 copies of cosine square. So 5 copies of cosine square minus 3, just 3. Oh, that's the right side, our destination. Okay, final.